The thing with tort reform that people need to understand, it can affect anyone in this world. I mean, you could be an orthopedic surgeon making good money and having a beautiful life. All of a sudden, this tractor trailer comes and rear ends and you're paralyzed.
I'm attorney David Craig, managing partner and one of the founders of Craig, Kelly & Faultless. For over 35 years, I've dedicated my career to helping individuals and families who have been seriously injured or lost loved ones in devastating semi-truck, large truck, and other commercial motor vehicle accidents. When tragedy strikes, life can feel chaotic, overwhelming, and uncertain. Many people don't even know where to begin or what questions to ask. That's why I created After the Crash, a podcast designed to empower you with the knowledge and resources you need to navigate these challenging times. In each episode, I sit down with experts, professionals, victims, and others involved in truck wreck cases to give you insight, guidance, and practical advice. Together, we'll help you understand your rights, protect your family, and move forward. This is After the Crash. Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Craig on After the Crash, the podcast. Today, we are grateful to have Steve Grover, an attorney from Canada, as our guest. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, David, so nice to be on your podcast. Obviously, it's an honor, and I've known you for quite some time in the trucking field down in the United States. And just to clarify something, so I'm in the province of Alberta, and technically we can't call ourselves attorneys. We can only be known as lawyers or barristers. So Just to make sure for the record, okay? I don't want
lawyers or barrister.
Correct, yeah.
All right. Well, Steve is he's got a few locations. Tell us, and Steve is an excellent attorney. Steve is.
Oh, thanks.
I met Steve when during one of these trucking conferences. He was actually one of the first. Went to the first specific kind of niche trucking group in the United States. There was a group that formed of plaintiff lawyers that handled trucking cases, and Steve was one of the first ones in that niche. So now, guys, we've been doing this now for quite some time. But I assume trucking is a big part of your practice.
Yeah, I mean, trucking is a big part of our practice, obviously, and we also do other auto cases. I've taken a lot of motorcycle falls on. Especially when there's a truck hitting a motorcycle. I'm a motorcyclist myself. We also do a lot of premise liability claims. Obviously, in Canada, there's a lot of snow, there's a lot of ice, so there's slip and falls, trip and falls. Sometimes we've taken some dog bites and med mal. So it's generally a plaintiff-only personal injury firm, but we do have a part of our firm that's trucking only. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Steve is he has his law firm. It's called the Grover Law Firm. And my favorite thing about Steve, though, is he's the host of the Bulldog Brew House podcast.
Yeah.
And so and that maybe you can explain why that little dog is sitting next to you.
Well, I mean, I like being a lawyer, but I also like to have fun at work. And if you ever visit my office in Calgary, you're always invited, David. Yeah. We got a lot of Canadian arts in here in my office. I always believe in helping Canadians, especially artists and musicians. My wife's a musician. She's actually a jazz singer. And we have some motorcycles in the office. We got a couple Ducatis. And so, and then get to the story of the podcast. I just thought it'd be cool to do a podcast. Just another way, for people to get to know me, doing some interesting topics. Even though you were on my podcast last week, which I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. We sometimes we mix it up every month. Like last month before we had a cardiologist on the podcast. We've had a chronic pain doctor. We've had a motorcycle racer here in Canada. So we've mixed it up a little bit, not just to be law only, just to make it fun. And the reason it came up as the Bulldogs is I've got two Bulldogs at home. I've got Winston, who's at home sleeping, and I got Roosevelt. And so just the background of Winston, I know you're wearing your Indiana University fleece today, but he's a Georgia Bulldog fan. And then Roosevelt's a Mississippi State Bulldog fan. And we have Winston as our mascot for the motorcycle accident division of our firm. And then I got little Roosevelt right here. It looks like a little polar bear, but that is a bulldog, okay? And so Roosevelt is our mascot. for our trucking division. And I think next year when I have the booth I think it's in Denver next year at the ATAA, I'm going to probably bring some of these baby Roosevelts around because, and the story about that is we do some cases in British Columbia, and I was at a conference in Vancouver, trial lawyers at BC, and there's an IME company, these independent medical assessment companies, they hire these doctors. And I went out for the coffee break and I saw their booth and they had a bunch of teddy bears. And I thought, well, that's stupid. What are you talking about? We're lawyers. We're educated, we're refined. And then I came back out at lunchtime and all the little teddy bears were gone. And I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. So then I had Winston, and then we eventually got Roosevelt, and we got them as our mascots. And I just thought to make it fun, call it the Bulldog Brew House. I mean, we're drinking coffee, or it could be beer, and then just call it the podcast. Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting, and I know you show me pictures of your dogs. My dog is back here sleeping on the.
Well, I noticed that. Yeah, she's flipping around on your couch.
Yeah, she's lazy, but she's always here in my office as well.
Yeah.
But Steve is you have offices in different locations in Canada. Is that correct?
Yeah. So our main office is in Calgary. So anytime if you want to come up to the Calgary Stampede, the greatest outdoor show in the world, it's the biggest rodeo. That's usually the first week of July. We're based in Calgary, which is becoming more of a cosmopolitan city now. I think it's the third largest city population-wise in Canada now, almost 2 million with the surrounding area. And then we have an office in Edmonton, which is up highway number 2 from us, up 3 hours. And then we have an office in between Calgary and Edmonton in a town about 150,000 people called Red Deer. Okay. And then I'm licensed as a lawyer in Nova Scotia. So we have an office in Digby, and I'm licensed as a lawyer in New Brunswick. We don't have an office there. We're looking at putting one maybe in Moncton. And then I'm also licensed, which is good for trucking, because you've probably seen that show called Ice Road Truckers.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a Canadian show, all those big accents. And I'm actually licensed in Northwest Territories and the Yukon. So, and then we have a little office in the Yellowknife, which is minus 55 degrees Celsius, which is pretty darn cold in the wintertime.
Yeah, stay away from that one. So now, as far as, I always like to start off by, tell me a little bit about your journey, like what caused you to go into law? Was your family lawyers, or did you, what was it that caused you to go into law, personal injury law?
Yeah, I mean, it was just interesting. We grew up, I've got 3 younger sisters, and they're all here in the surrounding area of Calgary still. We all came back, and my dad was a surgeon, my mom was a nurse, and, my dad was very, on top of education. Like, Steve, you're 5'7", you're never going to be NFL quarterback. Okay, forget about it, You're not good enough to play hockey. You're not going to be the next Wayne Gretzky. So we always push education with my sisters and I. And I think it was about probably grade 10. He sat me down with my 3 sisters and said, there's only 2 jobs in the world. One's medicine and one's law. And that's it. And then I don't know what it's like down in Indiana, but like sometimes kids want to, I just graduated high school and I just did 12 years of education. I want to take a year off. And my dad said, nope. You know what, Steve? There's 2 things that are going to happen. You take that year off, you're out of the house. Or number 2, you go to university and I'll help you pay for it. So I took the easier way out going to university. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so very interesting. We're just a family that's very persistent. I was never like an AA student until I got to law school. I actually figured out how to study in law school. I studied smart, not longer. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so we just persisted. And myself, I'm a lawyer. My sister, Lisa, she's a lawyer in Banff and Canmore. I don't know if, you're probably familiar with Banff. It's a gorgeous part of the world. Mm-hmm. My second sister, Danielle, she's a lawyer and she's sort of like a corporate lawyer. And then my youngest sister, Maya, she followed the steps of my dad and became a physician. And now she's a family physician here in Calgary. And then regarding personal injury, I mean, you go to law school, and I remember going to law school in Texas, and, you see all these ads everywhere, like these billboards and these TV ads. And it's like, okay, I mean, this is not the avenue I really want to go to law school for. And then all of a sudden I came back to Canada and we have to article here. Okay. I don't know if you're familiar with it's sort of like an internship where, you graduate law school, you go find a firm, they hire you as an articling student. It's based on the old British common law system in the United Kingdom. And so I found a firm and they're general practice and they'd had a personal injury division. And my dad being a doctor, he said, okay, well, I'll get you got a medical background a little bit because of me. Like, okay, Dad, I don't know much about surgery. And then all of a sudden I started getting business and I started liking it. And what I liked about it is it's just the individual aspect of, helping people injured in an accident. It wasn't their choice to be in the crash. Okay. And then the medical side, I mean, I've done a lot of reading on medicine. I've kept all my dad's books on medicine since he's passed away. And just the challenge of, going up against an insurance company and getting justice for your clients. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
do you enjoy the medical side? I mean, having that background in the medical with your dad, I mean, do you enjoy developing the medical side of a case?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I mean, it's just about learning about traumatic brain injuries, the silent injury. Like, I could see someone walking down the street in Indianapolis and he looks fine to me. And then all of a sudden he's irritable and freaks out. And then you realize later on he was in a big trucking accident where he had a traumatic brain injury. It's just fascinating. And, given the NFL and what's going on, the studies, we're just learning a little bit of how the brain works.
Sure.
And you know what, at the end of the day, I tell all my lawyers and all my staff, like, yeah, it's great to get that, fractured, humerus or broken ankle. And it's terrible for the client to go through that, but it's objective evidence. You see the x-ray and you see the fractured leg, you can't dispute that the accident, but in the brain, it's like, if you can't, you could lose a leg. I've had a lot of clients lose legs in motorcycle accidents and they get a prosthetic leg, but you can't get a prosthetic brain.
Right.
And honestly, I like the psychological aspect of these injury cases, the brain injuries, the post-traumatic syndrome, the general anxiety disorder, because you have to realize where this person came from, talk to lay people before and after, friends, family, coworkers, how this person has changed. And then, get a medical report to substantiate your claim to educate the court about psychological brain injuries.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, I can remember, so I've been doing this now 40 years, and
Yeah.
what we know about brain injuries today is so much different than what we did 40 years ago because of
Yeah.
the war. We have the wars and we have unfortunately, soldiers coming back with brain
Yeah.
injuries. We have the athletes who we now
Hmm.
we know a lot more about brain injuries because of the athletes. And it really is. But unfortunately, like you said, you can look at somebody and if it's not a bleed, if it's not their head's not deformed,
Yeah.
they look the same. They look healthy.
Yeah.
But like you said, the people who knew him before and after, oftentimes they'll describe a completely different person than who was the person before the wreck.
Yeah. 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 So I just find that very challenging to build a case like that because, you got to you're in mediation or you're in court and you have to tell the spouse, like, is this the same person you married before? No. And, the other spouse is going to be upset. But you know what? And maybe you have to separate in separate rooms to talk to them separately because they still have to live together.
Yeah.
But it's shocking, all of a sudden this is not the person I married 30 years ago. And now I have to deal with it. Or I've had the unfortunate circumstances in brain injury cases, like one of the big first trucking cases I took on, they end up in divorce, and it was just terrible to see the whole family split up and, they couldn't afford to sell the house or he couldn't afford while the case was going on to get an apartment in Calgary. So he moved in the basement suite. And it was very interesting evidence of talking to the kids, like, well, dad was bringing these girls home to the basement suite with mom upstairs. I mean, it just didn't dawn on him that that's not the right thing to do. Does that make sense, my client?
Especially if they have a frontal lobe injury, they just don't have the awareness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, one of the things that's frustrating to me though is that trying to get value out of those cases, I actually hired a neuropsychologist and a trial consultant, And we just started running a whole bunch of focus groups with the same facts. We took
Hmm.
the same facts and we just kept developing it, trying to figure out how do we educate the public on a mild traumatic brain injury.
Yeah.
And we now know that you have an increased risk of Alzheimer's, dementia,
Oh
and all
yeah.
these other things. But yet, and so how do we convince people? How do we show people? How do we persuade people and
Yeah.
educate people? And so
Yeah.
we spent several years and hundreds of thousands of dollars just doing focus groups, trying to figure out what is the best. And we also had a medical illustrator that we used.
Hmm.
And so we continue to work on it and tweak it so that we could find the best messaging and the best way to educate people.
Yeah.
So, but
And
it
you
is a
know,
challenge.
and I've done this for almost 30 years. I'm younger than you, okay? But sometimes I find like these medical experts, and I've read studies in the U.S., a lot of juries don't trust these experts. And, at the end of the day, I get an expert, I get a neuropsych, and then defense gets their neuropsych, and then you got the battle of the experts in between. And like we have bench trials up here in Alberta, and like, are they really going to say this expert is not like accept their opinion or throw it out? What I found is you bring in the lay people, like the family, the coworkers, the friends. He used to go riding motorcycle every Saturday with me, and now I don't see him anymore. I mean, that's
Mhm.
pretty impactful. Or he used to read a book every Sunday and teach the kids math, and he doesn't do anything. Or he has these big explosions and just starts throwing stuff around the house. And that was not the Frank I married
Yeah.
25 years ago. And I think that has more of an impact because it's really hard for defense. Like, how can you go up against a layperson and say, like, you're lying? Or,
Right.
did Frank offer you 50 grand out of the settlement? Like, you can't ask that kind of stuff. So, what is the interest of those people coming to court or even a mediation, if they're allowed, and, not telling the truth? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And they're not going to, and you have enough of them describing
Yeah.
different things, and they're
Yeah.
like, and they relate well. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I absolutely agree. I think before after witnesses oftentimes are more powerful than the
Yeah.
medical side, medical people,
Yeah.
especially on a mild traumatic brain injury where there's not a
Yeah.
bleed or some
Yeah.
type of objective evidence.
Yeah.
Um, so no, I agree wholeheartedly with you. So I think you mentioned something here, that you have bench trials, and I think that people listening to this, this is average everyday folks out here in the country and throughout the country, and they would be shocked to know that you don't have jury trials. I mean, our Seventh Amendment,
Yeah.
in the United States, guarantees federal civil suits on claims of certain kind of cases, certain type of money. Most states have adopted, the right to jury trial in their state constitutions, or they have those few that don't have codes or statute legislation
Yeah.
that gives you the right to a jury trial. But you
Yeah.
guys don't have just an absolute right to jury trials, right?
No, it's kind of interesting. We don't have a constitutional right to have a jury trial. I mean, there is a right to have a jury trial on a criminal case, but in a civil personal injury case, it's usually trial by bench. And there is a civil jury act where in Alberta you can apply to the court. You have to make a request to the Chief Justice of Alberta. He or she will then appoint a judge to hear the application. You have to put $2,000 in court for the application. And then you go back and forth, and, usually, there'll be experts, and then the case laws come out. Like if it's way too complicated, if you got a neuropsych against a neuropsych, you got MRI imagings, and you've got a physiatrist, and you've got all economists, it may be too complicated for a layperson to grasp those ideas. And so the application would be struck, and then you just go to a bench trial only. Does that make sense?
So how long does it like? So let's say somebody is visiting from the United States and goes up to Canada
Yeah.
on vacation, and unfortunately they get hit by a semi, and
Yeah.
someone dies. It's a wrongful death case rather than an injury case.
Yeah.
How long would that take up there to move that case to a resolution? Typically, just on average.
Oh, I mean, it could take, it matters on the insured. I mean, like we like to file and serve right away on that. I
Okay.
like to get into question right away to see any liability issue. But I mean, unfortunately, I'm going to say in my office, I tell my lawyers, my staff, we're looking 5 to 8 years to get resolution.
Okay.
It
All right.
takes a long time. And, we have to go through questioning, obviously, like depositions. I assume that's what they call them in Indiana.
Uh-huh.
And then there's further documents you got to get. And then I got to get my independent medical reports. The defense has got to get their reports. And then since 2010, we have a mandatory mediation rule where you have to go to mediation unless you can bring an application to show like if mediation is kind of useless, which usually doesn't work. And then from there, get a judge appointed. You really don't know your judge until 24 hours before the case, possibly
Really?
when you go to trial. And we on those complicated brain injury cases or big trucking cases. I mean, you're looking at 2 to 3 week trial. I mean, and it does take a while, unfortunately. There is now a new rule that's come out as July this year. It's mandatory litigation plans, and supposedly they're trying to put all this in the 3 years, which we'll see how it works. But any pleading filed in the court at King's Bench in Alberta, which is sort of like our district court, you have to after September 1st, 2025, you have to enter into a proposed mandatory litigation plan with the other side. And you have to get all these steps done in 3 years, which, we'll see how it works. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they're trying to streamline it, but, it may not work. It may work. We'll see what happens.
So do you guys have United States, we're bombed, and you mentioned it. I think you said you went to law school maybe, or in Texas?
Yeah, in Texas. Yeah, in Texas, in big Dallas. So don't mention the Cowboys, okay?
So you saw all the advertising and stuff that happens in the United States.
Yeah.
And you come back, obviously, in the United States, go to seminars. So we're bombarded. I mean, and I just finished writing a book it's never been easier to pick the wrong attorney, because they're everywhere.
Exactly.
In Canada, do you have as much advertising like we do in the States?
Yeah, I mean, you go to a jurisdiction like Ontario, Toronto, it's pretty competitive out there. There's billboards, there's TV ads. There's pamphlets, there's exhibitions like motorcycle shows people go to. Alberta is, Calgary and Edmonton are kind of different cities. Calgary is like where all the corporate oil and gas headquarters are for Canada, sort of like the Dallas of the North or the Houston of the North for Canada. Edmonton is a big city, more of not corporate headquarters. So there's more, personal injury lawyers there. It seems like there's more advertising there. But, there is TV advertising here. There's billboards. I've got a couple billboards in around Calgary and the surrounding area. I don't know if they work, but there's a billboard outside our building. I thought I'll buy it because I don't want another injury lawyer buying it from me. Does it make sense?
Sure. Well, and I think one of the challenges is for people who aren't in the business. Like if somebody calls me and says, "Hey, Dave, do you know a good divorce lawyer?"
Yeah.
I can direct them to a good divorce lawyer. But if you're not in this business, you have no idea who's a good personal injury lawyer, who's a good divorce lawyer, who's a good criminal lawyer.
Yeah.
And so, if folks in the United States are going up to Canada again for vacationing, they get in an accident, or people who live up in Canada, what would you recommend to somebody on a serious injury or wrongful death case involving a semi or just anything, if you're on a motorcycle or whatever it is, how would you recommend people go about picking the right personal injury lawyer? Because obviously you know what you're doing. You're a great choice. But how does the average person know that?
Well, I mean, they can watch this podcast. You know what I'm saying? I mean, first of all, you can just start Googling groverlawfirm.com. That's fair. Yeah. But, it is like advertising speed up in Canada, especially in Alberta just recently. And, it's word of mouth. I mean, you want to make sure the person has experience, resources, and dedication to take on the file. I tell people up front, like, listen, you're not going to settle your case for 2 years. You know what I'm saying? Because, most doctors will tell you, like, listen, I can't tell if it's permanent injury from, chronic pain, if it with that 2-year prognosis kind of going forward. You want to make sure that they can litigate the case. I mean, they know what they're doing. You want to ask them, well, what cases have they gone to court with? Visit their office. I mean, if it looks like a nice office, well prepared and organized, yeah, sure. I mean, but I think it's important to ask around. I mean, obviously looking at reviews online, checking out their website, see if they got a podcast like you and me, other than practicing law, we're busy doing this. and and just ask around too. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Well, and I think, one of the other things you look at are lawyers like yourself that are continuing working on getting better.
Yeah,
You and I both go to a lot of conferences, and we're
yeah,
going to those conferences, and every time I go to a conference, I learn something.
yeah,
And I think, yes, how in the world could I practice 40 years and not know that? Or
yeah.
something of change, or there's a new trend, or the trucking
Hmm.
companies are doing something that they, are hiding things in a different
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
And so I would think that you would want to pick a lawyer who's continuing to improve themselves.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard to say if they are continuing. You can always check if they're doing presentations. You can always meet the lawyer and ask them. Like I tell people up front, like I go to conferences across Canada. I go to conferences in the U.S. I did like school. I mean, when I came out of law school, I was trying to convince my dad to pay for a master's of law, and I got in a lot of programs in the U.S. He says, "Nope, Steve, you're out the door. You got three other sisters behind you. I got to pay for them." And so there's either again, you're out of the house or pay your own, figure your own way. So, I mean, I like the challenge of, always learning stuff. I think, it's very interesting. My dad told me like I wasn't a really good student in high school. And he says, Steve, just study hard till grade 12 and getting to university and life is like gravy. It's a gravy train. It's sort of like, I've ever seen that movie Platoon with Charlie Sheen?
Yeah.
And then that one guy is telling Charlie, like, once they get out of here back to the U.S. and get out of Vietnam, it's going to be a gravy train. And my dad's, yeah, that's what's going to happen to you, dude. Steve, when you get out of high school, man, it's going to be gravy. No, it's not gravy. It just keeps on becoming more difficult, more challenging. But I think you need to understand that life every day is a learning process. You got to learn something new. And your brain is like a muscle. And if you don't work your brain, you're not gonna have your brain like you get dementia, Alzheimer's. It's very interesting to read studies about people who retire. I mean, I read a study in England where a lot of people get Alzheimer's or dementia because they're not using their brain anymore, not communicating with people. And just recently, I know Jerry Spence just passed away, and he was in his 90s, and I think he had the right attitude. If you enjoy your work and you find it challenging and you want to learn every day, I think that's part of life. And it's great to go to Austin and have some good barbecue, but it's also great to talk to you, other lawyers, and sit in conferences and just challenge yourself every year to get better. Does it make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. So,
yeah,
and I also think I think you've written something. You've
yeah,
written
yeah,
right there, and I think that's important too, because there's a lot of lawyers who don't write anything, who don't give out any information that's helpful.
yeah, yeah.
And talk a little bit about what you've written.
Well, I wrote this book. I've written three books in my time. I actually met a publisher at I don't know if you've ever heard of Ken Hardison. There's a group called
Uh-huh.
Pilma,
Yep.
and I was trying to figure out marketing and how to get better at marketing. I sort of went through a lull like almost 15 years ago, and I went to his conferences and I met Paperback Express Publishing. It's a small publisher, and I just wrote this book about loader up and drive safe about trucking. And my book is just for the typical, American Canadian, just to get a little snapshot of what trucking cases are all about, how a lawyer would help. It's only an 80-page book. It's very easy to read. It'll probably take you half an hour to read it, but that's just the way I'm trying to educate the public on trucking. And also, like we talk about at ATAA conference with Joe Freed and the guys, we don't hate truckers. We depend on truckers for our commerce to survive in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have bread on the table or milk. But in a day, we're going after the bad truckers to keep them accountable. And I think that's really important for people to understand. And they can pick up my book for free. It's on our website. It's only an 81-page book. And it just gives a big picture. I'm not much of a treatise guy. I don't want to write a long treatise about trucking and the regulations. I'd rather just try and cater to the typical client that we're dealing with, that give a snapshot of what I do, what I can do, and it's sort of like a little marketing tool we have for us. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Well, and I think that, so many people that, they have no idea what they're up against, and they're in
Hmm.
a wreck, they're in a truck accident, and their life is chaotic.
Yeah,
They're dealing with horrible injuries. They may be dealing with death. They may be sitting in a hospital. And I
yeah,
think that it's really nice and helpful to be able for them to be able to gather information like your book
Yeah.
to be able to gain information and insight.
Yeah. Yeah, so I
So
just saw it as an avenue, and I have a book on motorcycle accidents and actually one on premise liability called Beyond the Banana Peel. I don't know if you think about that.
it's got a picture of banana peel on it, right? On the
Yeah, it's
cover.
got a banana peel on. I can send you a copy if you ever
Yeah,
want one.
I've seen it. I looked
Yeah,
online.
yeah,
And both of the, are all three of your books mainly aimed at the consumer?
yeah. Pretty much consumer. Like I think it's very important to be intellectual, but you got to understand where your clients, consumers are coming from. I'm not going to be representing the Rockefeller family in a trucking accident, probably not. You understand? And I think it's really important to give back to the community. We do that a lot with Grover Law Firm. Understand where our clients are coming from. Like you mentioned, a lot of people are in these big trucking accidents, and they're living paycheck to paycheck. It's really hard in Canada and the U.S. right now with inflation and taxes. And a lot of lawyers say, like, what's the big deal? You're missing one week of pay. Well, what's the big deal? But that paycheck depends on feeding the whole family. Maybe the member of the family was working two jobs just to pay school fees and put bread on the table and pay for gas. I think you really need to understand like where your clients are coming from, because you and I, we don't represent the big, ivory tower institutions. We represent the typical person in North America. Does it make sense?
Yeah. I mean, what should people know about the Grover Law Firm? I mean, what should they know? I mean, why are you different? Why go to you? Why should I come hire your law firm? Why are you going to be different and take good care of me as somebody who gets injured up in Canada?
Well, I think, I've taken a lot of time to understand what other law firms are doing and try and integrate that into my firm, take the good and the bad and realize what the bad is. I think, client contact is really important. If I go to buy a car, I want to make sure there's a receptionist there. There's a salesperson to be patient with me, to show me the car. If I want to pay cash or financing, walk me through all the alternatives rather than treat you like a number. So I grow at our firm, we always have a receptionist. I will always have a receptionist, even with the advent of AI coming on. I don't like to call companies where press one to get David, press two to get Steve. I don't like that. I like someone. And, we spend the time to actually, I tell people, like, we're going to take your case seriously. We're going to build it. We're going to trial because, if you want peace, you prepare for war, like Sun Tzu, The Art of War, that book. And that was one of the first books I read as an articling student. My principal told me to read that book, and it was a foundation of how to build a business or how to live your life or how to run a law firm. And then, we have the experience. Obviously, we got knowledge. We're always going to conferences, and we're dedicated. I think you have to be persistent in what you're doing and not give up until you get the right result for your client. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How important is it to have the resources? I mean, in these bigger, complicated, you're battling the biggest insurance companies, you're battling some big corporations, you're battling some big trucking companies.
Yeah.
How important is it to have a lawyer who has the resources to invest in your case?
Well, I think it's one of the most important things is like not only be tenacious, but have the resources to keep on fighting that case for year and pushing them because they expect, plaintiff lawyer to give up or not have the resources to go to trial. I mean, you can easily spend 100 to 200 grand in disbursements alone to go to a 2-3 week trial, but you got to budget that and you sort of have a war chest or a line of credit or financing coming in from revenue. And you just have, I think it's really important to, go through depositions. If you have to, depose like 5 or 6 employees and former employees to find the right answer on liability, you got to do it. You got to fight for your client, stand up for your client in depositions. You got to go hire those experts, like you mentioned, a neuropsych, a biomechanical engineer, an economist to prove your case. Because it's, you got to remember, as plaintiff counsel, we've got the burden of proof to prove the case. Mm-hmm. Defense can sit back and do nothing. And, there's a non-suit now because, at the end of the day, plaintiff counsel closed their case and they have no expert evidence to show anything. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and I think like you said, it costs money. I mean, the
Yeah.
reality is it takes money, and
Yeah.
our clients don't have the money, nor should they have to invest the money to go up and hire mechanics, reconstructionists, all
Yeah.
these other experts like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And so the lawyer is going to have to front that money.
Yeah.
And if I just recently, a lawyer came to me and said, "Hey, I need $50,000,"
Hmm.
and my wife said no, because
Hmm.
my wife said no, and
Yeah.
so he was skimping on doing things that he knew he should do.
Yeah.
He just didn't have the war chest built up,
Yeah.
and then he went to talk to his wife about it, who helped run his firm,
Hmm.
and she's like no. And so he came to me, but it was kind of late in the game. He should have invested some of the money early. But
Yeah.
I don't think, if you're an average person who's not been part of the law process, you
Yeah.
may not recognize that if you pick the wrong lawyer and
Yeah.
that lawyer doesn't have a war chest or doesn't have the resources or doesn't understand the importance of hiring experts, you
Yeah.
could really put yourself at a disadvantage.
Oh yeah, yeah. I totally agree with that. I mean, if you got to, any kind of orthopedic injuries, you got to get those IMEs in. Get in, orthopedic surgeon to do not only get a report from the treating orthopod or the family doctor, but get an independent, expert to be. Their duty is for the court to educate the court, not have bias. Obviously, from any kind of orthopedic injury like a broken leg, you're probably going to have chronic pain. Get a physiatrist, and then from there, maybe get an OT to do a functional assessment, cost of care analysis. And then from there, get an economist, and maybe you need a vocational assessment psychologist too, to say, okay, Frank can't do these jobs, but he can do these jobs, light sedentary job, rather than being a heavy duty mechanic. I mean, that all costs like anywhere from 50 to 100 grand for all those experts. And
Absolutely.
it costs a lot of money. And I was naive. Like, I'll let you know, when I was 28, like, oh my God, like these guys are making big money, man. I just want to get one big file and like I can buy a Ferrari. And I didn't understand the whole implication. And, insurance companies, they just don't tender the limits. Like if it's $1 million case, like I know in the U.S., you guys are constantly fighting when I go to these trucking seminars about peeling the onion. Like, okay, I think minimum for trucks, semi-tractor trailers, like 750 grand US, and you got someone who loses their life and used to be a doctor. I mean, 750 is not going to go very far, and you got to they just don't tender the limits. I've never had a case in almost 30 years where, a trucking company, insurance company just tendered their limits and said that we're done. They're going to fight you because, they want to save that money or prove that, that case ain't worth $1 million or $2 million. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Or if they do offer it, you become very suspicious.
Yeah, there's more money
There's
behind the
more money.
table.
They're trying to get you to take a quick settlement, and
Yeah.
and we've been finding, it's amazing to me how many times we've been lied to about how
Yeah.
much insurance there is, and in fact, we found out there was different stacks or different layers, and so
Yeah.
we have a method that we go through, because
Yeah.
I just don't take them, even if they've answered interrogatories in U.S. where we've got written answers under oath and produced the policy. It's not always accurate,
Yeah, I know.
and they lie to their own lawyers. So it's
Oh,
not the
yeah.
lawyers misrepresenting things.
Yeah.
It's the insurance company, the trucking company. So
Yeah. Yeah, I always hear you got to go up the insurance tower to get more policy, don't you, pretty
yeah,
much? Yeah.
absolutely.
That's the
Well, one
same
of the
here in
things you
Canada.
said. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the same in Canada too. You don't know if there's an umbrella policy or a farm policy involved. I mean, you got a commercial truck that causes an accident that's part of farm. There's probably a farm policy with more insurance there. You know what I'm saying?
So you've got to have an attorney that has the knowledge that they can go back and say, okay, you want to make sure that you exhausted every avenue to get your client's money.
Correct. Yeah.
And one of the things you said early on, I think, was you got to go visit their office, and I think that's important, because one of the things that I always tell people that it's a red flag is you
Hmm.
go to their office and their signs are all wore out, their furniture's
Yeah.
wore out, maybe they got names on the letterhead that they're no longer there, and they can't afford to
Yeah.
change the signs,
Oh, yeah.
and you're like, you walk in there like, well, then maybe they don't have the resources
Yeah.
necessary to take my case. That might be a red flag. You might want to turn around and go out and find
Oh,
yourself
yeah.
somebody else.
And you talk about that. When I opened my own firm, like 2003, I went around and just, I was looking in the window, looking at different offices, how they decorate their offices, had my mom come. help decorate our office. And then like I went to one office, they had a big coffee stain right down the hallway of the reception area. It's like, no, and I don't want blue carpet either, because, unfortunately appearances, your first impression is the lasting impression. Would that make sense? You know what I'm saying? And I think it's important. And look around the office. Like if it's a dirty office and there's papers everywhere, maybe your case is going to get disorganized. You know what I'm saying? Are they completely online now? Are they using AI? That's another question. I mean, we learned in Austin about how AI is going to be taking over the world. I think it's going to be a big game changer in society and the economy, and probably in the practice of the law too. Make our job easier. But unfortunately, there could be a lot of jobs lost in the legal industry with support staff with AI. And are they using AI to research their cases? And, the other thing that's come up in Canada, and I know in the U.S., are they depending on AI to get their case law? Because you can look at the case law, but maybe that's the wrong case. It's not in this jurisdiction. So are they noting up their cases? Because I know a couple lawyers have gotten in trouble in Canada depending on AI to do the research, and the case didn't even exist in Canada. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Well, in the U.S., there's lawyers getting sanctioned regularly now, and but that's just laziness.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
just purely, even if I had an associate draft a brief for me, we're gonna check the sites,
Yeah.
and so they're pulling stuff off of a computer
Yeah.
and using AI, and they're not checking the sites, and
Hmm.
they're filing these briefs with the court, and
Yeah.
and I and those are the same people who there used to be a lawyer here in the States, and he would cite cases all the time. Now they were actual sites,
Yeah.
but they never stood for what he said they did. And so you
Yeah.
had to actually read every case that he cited because I guarantee you they didn't say what he said.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that, it bothers me that lawyers are lazy enough that they're having AI do the research and they're not even reading or proofing before they file it with the court.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, any brief that comes in that one of my associates do, I always want to double check the brief. I get on my red pen and mark it up and I set up the cases we're quoting, and just to make sure that we're putting out a professional product, because obviously we want the client to review it, see if there's any changes, and then when we go to mediation or court, we don't want it to jump out and say, "Listen, well, where did you guys get this case?" or "This argument doesn't even make sense."
Yeah.
You know.
So you've been doing this for a while. So how involved are you in
No.
cases today?
I like to be here 5 days a week. Even Saturday morning, I like to come in. I mean, it was very interesting. My dad was a surgeon, and he had to do his rounds at the hospital here in Calgary from 9 a.m. to noon. And then so he would take me along. I go to the general hospital when it was still around here in Calgary. He put me in the doctor's lounge, and there was a big doctor's lounge, like TVs everywhere. They don't have this anymore now. Okay, that's the doctor lounge idea is gone. They had 50 different cups of coffee and hot chocolate and chicken noodle, and all the doctors would come and talk to me while my dad was doing his rounds. So I was just used to seeing my dad do that because he was committed to his practice as a doctor. And, he's making money working a Saturday morning, but then we'd have the rest of the weekend off to spend together to go to Banff or go like for a little drive or play tennis. But I just like coming in on Saturday morning. I mean, some people think it's weird, but it's quiet time. There's no phone calls or maybe an email, but you can just focus on getting some work cleaned up or get organized for the week coming up. And I like meeting the clients. I think it's really important if you're the lead lawyer in the firm to meet the clients and make them feel reserved that, you're going to be involved in the case, help out in applications, go to court, help out in mediations. I think it's not micromanaging, but I'm always there in the background. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Well, and I know you mentioned that a big part of your practice is motorcycle cases.
Yeah.
It's curious, so you actually ride as well, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I got too many bikes. I mean, I'm always thinking in the back of my head, my next bike. I'm looking at the BMW 1300 GS Adventure. And, I just like bikes. My whole family, interesting rides too. My brother-in-law, who's married to my sister, who's a doctor, he has a company called Perfect Lap. He does a lot of racing at the track here near Calgary. He'll train people. My dad was a car guy. He liked cars. I like bikes, and I just enjoy getting out on the road. It is dangerous. Like honestly, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Before I get on my bike, I sort of pray to God that I'm coming home in one piece because the accidents I've seen people come in losing limbs and brain injuries, and how families can get destroyed in a wrongful death case by a split of second. You're riding a bike and someone could hit you, and you could lose your leg. And I think it's important, if anyone rides a bike, my theory is I pretend I'm invisible. So it's my obligation to look out for the vehicles, not for them to look for me, because I guarantee they're not paying attention to me. And it is kind of scary now, doing a lot of motorcycle accidents, trucking accidents, and being out on the road. And I just tend to get out of Calgary and go away where there's no cars around. But I'm always being attentive 110%.
So do you think that, being, riding has helped you and makes you a better motorcycle plaintiff lawyer?
Yeah, I think, I mean, sometimes I believe, we always hear the theme at these trucking seminars or on the list service or ATA, a trucking accident is not like an auto accident. Same, I think a motorcycle accident is different. You need to understand how a motorcycle runs, what the maintenance requirements are. I mean, it is a standard clutch, where your blind spots are even on a motorcycle. And so I think it helps me understand motorcycling and also trucking cases too, because, a lot of motorcyclists don't understand there's huge blind spots when you pull in right beside a 53-foot long trailer. They're not going to see you. You know what I'm saying? And, I always learn something new. Like when I ride my bike, like, oh, that guy could have caused an accident. Or, construction sites, be careful when you're riding your motorcycle through a construction site because the roads are uneven. The last thing I want to be involved in, even though I've been in many motorcycle accidents, is another motorcycle accident where I could lose a limb or change my family's dynamic forever.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned too premise cases because you guys get some bad weather up north. And so in some states here, Indiana, we get snow, we get ice,
Yeah.
I think in Ohio, those are tougher cases. It's kind of like, if it's kind of a known risk.
Yeah.
Indiana, we have comparative fault. Chicago, I mean, so they're tough cases, but
Yeah.
they're winnable cases. How tough are they? A premise slip and fall ice kind of case up where you're at?
Well, I mean, we do in Alberta and like jurisdictions like Nova Scotia, where I'm also licensed as a lawyer, we do have the Occupiers Liability Act, which is a statute. Pretty much, there's Section 5 says there's a reasonable duty to take care of the premises for visitors, invitees. They're interesting cases. And, you just got to get out there. You got to get, like, I go with this. Every file pretty much we open, I make sure I go to the scene of a slip and fall, a trip and fall. I want to see what happened. There's certain defendants you don't want to take on, like the city of Calgary, because you got to prove gross negligence.
Okay.
So, I mean, they are challenging, but, like my dad said, no pain, no gain. You know what I'm saying? You got to work hard to make the money. And if it comes too easy to you, there's obviously something more hidden behind it. And premise liability claims, you got to get out to the scene. You got to get those shoes, keep that evidence. What were they drinking? Anything? Did they have anything in their hand? Were they paying attention? You go to Walmart now and they have these like corridors where you have to go through to get to the cashier because they're putting all the stock there that they want to sell. But it's taking your attention away from the floor because you're looking at that, Reese's peanut butter cup, chocolate bar and say, do I really want this? It is this Friday night. Do I want to cheat on my diet? And then all of a sudden there's soda, Coke or soda all over the floor and you slip and fall and you break your leg. So they are challenging. And you have to get the investigator out to take photos of the scene, get statements. Obviously, some of these, owners of premises are not very cooperative to give us the investigation report. Are they doing an investigation? Are their CCTV cameras working? How many times I've done a premise liability claims and the video cameras are not working? Like, okay, well, how are you going to prove my otherwise? You understand? Yeah.
Yeah. So, so again, if, somebody's up there visiting and they're not familiar with the local law, their vacation there, is there a statute, like in most states in the United States, we have a statute of limitations.
Yeah.
And we have to bring a case within a certain period of time. So in Indiana, if you get hit by a truck, you've got 2 years typically, unless you're a minor or incapacitated. But in Tennessee, it's 1 year. So
Yeah.
it varies depending on which state you're in.
Yeah.
So we always tell people to move quickly because you don't know. And certain like consortium claims may be different, slip and fall cases may be different. Do you
Yeah.
guys have statutes and limitations?
Yeah, we have a Limitations Act, which is codified with our Alberta statutes, and it's a 2-year limitation period. There is a discoverability rule.
Okay.
Obviously with a med mal case or a sexual assault case, there's leeway on that. But if you're in a car accident or you're visiting Banff and you slip and fall in a store and you break your ankle, you've got 2 years to file the suit. And then from the date you file the suit, you've got 1 year to serve all the defendants
Okay.
with the pleadings. Yeah.
So what do you think the biggest challenge a personal injury lawyer faces today?
Mm, I think it's always tort reform, no matter what. I mean, these insurance companies, they've got all the money, they've got all the power, they got all the lobbyists. I mean, they got sometimes they got the ear of the politicians. But the thing with tort reform that people need to understand, it can affect anyone in this world. I mean, you could be an orthopedic surgeon making good money and having a beautiful life. All of a sudden, this tractor trailer comes and rear-ends you and you're paralyzed. I mean, I think that's the biggest fear all the time is this persona of tort reform, this idea of ambulance chasing, which I don't agree upon. And I know it's tough to take on these cases. First of all, someone's, their whole life is turned upside down. They don't know what to do for money. The family's all disarrayed, and you're just trying to put their life as it was before the crash. And that's just a battle every day litigating these cases, So I think tort reform is the number one threat to personal injury. And just that persona about, what kind of work do we really do? And it was very funny, like 15 years ago, a client said, like, you guys just push paper all day and you make all this money. Okay. So then we took his case on and we went all the way to court, and we had something called judicial dispute resolution, which is a mediation with a real trial judge in Calgary. And we came out, we settled. And he says, man, you guys worked your butt off for my case. I have so much respect for you guys. And that's another persona, because it's like seeing my dad and seeing him work in the clinic or going to the hospital. When you see a doctor, you actually see him or her and them working for you. But, I always tell my clients and even my staff and other lawyers, we don't do any work until it's behind the scenes and we're working away at a computer researching the case. Like, how can I take a phone call and work on a brief at the same time? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what else would you like people to know about Steve Grover or the Grover Law Firm or personal injury or truck cases?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is to realize that, I was raised by 2 loving parents and I got 3 good sisters. We're all working hard. I think the most important thing is, like my parents always taught us, is give back to the community. I think it's really important to be part of the community here in Calgary and Alberta and Canada. See what we can do to make this world better, because obviously, it's good to make money or have material stuff. But I mean, if for some reason I crash a motorcycle, it's going to be replaced. But I think it's really important to give back to the community. Trucking cases, like Joe Frieden, everyone says, we're not after the trucking industry. We love the trucking industry. They're a whole bastion for our society and commerce. But make sure you got good truckers out there. You got good trucking companies that are hiring good truckers, or not taking cut holes, shortcuts to make a profit, because you know how it is with profit over people. You know what I'm saying? And I've seen that in premise liability claims where they don't keep maintenance records because it costs money to keep those maintenance records, or a trucker's overworking out over shift because he's trying to make that delivery and he's already breaking the rules. So I think people need to understand that plaintiff lawyers and our law firm is here for the benefit of society. We are lawyers, but everyone's got to have a job. Doesn't matter if you're a housekeeper or a gas attendant or lawyer or doctor. Society's got to survive with everyone working together in the economy.
Yeah. Well, and I know you believe like I do, which is, I think we make a positive difference in the lives of our clients. And, but we also make a positive difference in the lives of our employees. But we also make a positive difference in the communities in which you practice, which is exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. So.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. after the crash, and you can. How do people go about finding you?
Well, we're all over Google, so just hit groverlawfirm.com. Check us out on social media. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, Twitter, X. And you know what? Just reach out to us if you ever want. If anyone just wants to come by the office and have coffee with me or my staff, just chit, see what we do, or just talk a little about community service and stuff like that, or feel free to reach out to me anytime. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, and I really appreciate it, David.
This is David Craig, and you've been listening to After the Crash. If you'd like more information about me or my law firm, please go to our website, ckflaw.com. Or if you'd like to talk to me, you can call 1-800-ASK-DAVID. If you would like a guide on what to do after a truck wreck, then pick up my book, Semi-Truck Wreck, A Guide for Victims and Their Families, which is available on Amazon, or you can download it for free on our website, ckflaw.com.